Hi, welcome back to Third Academy's Metaverse Campus. Welcome back to our weekly community event. And today we have a very interesting topic, right? Today we're talking about Web3 entertainment. We're talking about entertainment and then the potential of Web3 to, create new forms of entertainment. And for our space today, we have a very interesting guest who will be taking us through this topic. If you are listening to this, trust me, I am as excited as you are right now. And let's just get started with this to learn how Web3 is constantly improving and creating new forms of entertainment and the way that we consume and create this form of entertainment. All right, so we have Bennett with us, and Bennett, I just want you to introduce yourself. I know that Bennett has a background, that focuses on building multi-million dollar partnerships from scratch in multiple industry, and he has a vast wealth of knowledge to share from with us today. So, if you want to, introduce yourself, and let's meet you.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Excited to be here. And yeah, my name is Bennett. I'm part of an organization called Macroverse, where I lead the business development effort. And we are a digital entertainment company, really in both the Web2 and Web3 space. But to be honest, more excited about the Web3 side of things. Even if that's not where most people are quite yet. We do believe it's the future, and we think that it introduces all kinds of pretty cool possibilities in the world of entertainment and collectability and the cross section of the two, and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So let's begin by exploring some of the key trends that we see emerging in the space, right? So, in your opinion, how do you envision Web3 transforming the entertainment industry? I guess that's a good place for us to start.
Yeah, sure. So I think, like, at a high level, it all has to do with participation, because for really the entire history of entertainment, it's been a small number of individuals and companies who create the stuff, and then most of us are consumers of that stuff. And I really think that Web3 is opening up possibilities for people to not necessarily, become experts, or it's not like everyone's going to become a film director or producer or anything like that, but they can participate in small ways up to potentially very big ways. And that has to do with like co-authoring tools. It has to do with being able to kind of remix different things, whether it be music, animation, game filming, comics, stuff like that. It has to do with personalization, where you could maybe have your own version of something that's procedurally generated or generated based on actions you've taken in the past. And so instead of being like passive consumers of entertainment content, it allows the fan the ability to feel more like a part of it. And I think importantly that ranges from just um, from like a really easy, opportunity in it where you're just getting rewarded for participating in things up to potentially, beginning to dabble in that being your career. Or maybe you're already a professional or like an amateur professional working in some kind of entertainment. And I think there's just going to be all kinds of opportunities to just become, uh, seen and known, and have your portfolio looked at by communities of people instead of behind a sort of walled garden of entertainment executives who you otherwise would probably never get in front of. Um, so anyway, and I can talk at length about this, but I think that's like what it all really boils back down to is participation, and I just think there's enormous potential in it, and almost a limitless number of different ways that could be taken advantage of.
Mm. Well, I love that you mentioned participation. One of the phrases that I heard in the past that have stuck with me since was, when someone said, participation is the best education that you can have in Web3. Well, I guess there's so much more, with being involved and with participating. And then also, can you elaborate on the concept of decentralized entertainment, right? Because that's something I want to learn more on when people say decentralized entertainment, what do they mean, and how can it change the way we create, consume, and even engage with content. The decentralization there, what does it really do for us? What changes does it bring?
Yeah. I mean, I think when people say the term decentralized entertainment, they probably mean lots of different things. And so it's one of those terms that is used loosely and still maybe a little bit like imperfectly defined. But when I think of it, and I know a lot of my colleagues and friends and such in the space think about it, it really boils down to two things. One is ownership, and the other is um, decision making. And so, in the sense of ownership, you could have, for example, so Macroverse focuses on digital comics. So I'll just use us as an example. You could have an entire comic book series where all of the different characters in that series are owned by individuals. And so you do like an NFT mint, like a PFP kind of thing, or something similar, and allow people to actually own those characters. And then as they get put into the comic or the comic grows into something more, comics are often kind of incubation hubs for content. And so it can be born as a comic, but maybe eventually be turned into a game or an animated series or who knows what else. And you could have, instead of Macroverse owning 100% of all the different pieces of that, we're able to still largely control the direction of the project, but with people being able to say, hey, that's my character in the book. And not only is that just kind of fun and cool, but I get royalties as a result, really avoiding any issues around. We've seen, some like SEC stuff in the NFT space with people essentially selling securities in an unregistered way. This isn't that. This is purely an intellectual property licensing arrangement between a company and individuals. And it's like a little bit unusual that they purchased those rights via the initial mint from the company that is then licensing it back from them. And maybe there's a better way to do it that we'll all figure out as we go. But I personally think it's a bit of fun to say, hey, we can kind of invest in this project. We can help it grow because people minted these characters. And if we want to use them, we have given over rights of the intellectual property to you. So there's some coming back the other way. And it's like this, again, participation aspect of things. So that's like the ownership part of it. And then the decision making part of it is, if we just think about filmmaking, Hollywood is notorious for having a very small number of people who really control the industry and green light film projects and kind of make all the decisions. And, oftentimes the data have shown that those people aren't like geniuses or something. They're just making calculated decisions based on all kinds of data. And, you know, those decisions can often be flawed because they're based on models that have to do with what algorithms are telling them will perform, what the trends are, things they know that are kind of low hanging fruit, cash grab type projects. And the industry has really, unfortunately, gone in a direction that's less about creativity and art and more about making safe bets, financially speaking. And the more you go towards like trying to be safe around your investments in filmmaking, the less you see like really cool new projects coming out and lots of remakes and sequels and copycat type things. And I think in the world of film 3, if we can call it that, where people are able to participate in where the direction of a story goes and whether or not a project gets greenlit, there's just a ton of opportunity to do things in new and interesting and different ways. There's opportunities for indie filmmakers to be seen and get things created and launched with the community of people supporting them. And it just gets a little bit out of that hierarchical structure of decision making. And then there's an argument for that some people say where it's like, if you kind of make all your decisions on a film based on a committee, just lots of people voting on what it should do or what it shouldn't, that you'll end up with just a mess of nonsense ideas. And I think there's some risk of that happening. But I also think that if you find a balance between, some creative leadership on somebody who, has experience in, again, whether it be filmmaking or anything else, but just to keep using filmmaking as an example, I think you need somebody kind of at the helm, but you can allow for input from people, and then um, take that input and be able to use it to inform decisions, instead of it's just, hey, this is the top voted thing, so we're going to do it even though it's a terrible idea. It's like not complete decentralization in that way. Some might call it like sufficient decentralization, and I think that's a really interesting way to do it. Maybe there's a future where we can completely decentralize the decision making process. I'm not
Right.
sure about that. I do know there's some people out there who believe that, hey, if the people want some film or game or whatever that sounds totally ridiculous, but the people are saying they want it, then make it. And who cares about the old way of doing things? And I don't know if I have the courage for that, but I look forward to seeing what the outcomes of things like that might be. So anyway, that's how I think about it. It's both kind of the ownership piece of things, as well as the decision making and kind of hierarchical, uh, ivory tower type situation that's typical in entertainment, that might be able to have opportunities to go around that a little bit. Please.
Interesting. And when you say decision making, you mean like the artists, participating in the way that their works are used, or what? Is that what you mean? Can you talk more a bit on the decision making
Yeah, when I
part
say
of it?
decision making, I'm talking really about like it just as a simple example, like green lighting a film.
Okay. Right.
Where there's film executives who get tons of scripts sent to them, and most of them end up in the garbage can, or if they're even looked at. Um, a decent number of them get optioned, and then of the ones that get optioned, most of them never get made. And so you could be a filmmaker or a writer, a screenwriter, and you have an idea for a movie, and you write the script, and you're networking your butt off to try to get it seen, and finally get it to a movie executive, or a production company, studio exec, and you're even lucky enough that they read it, and then you are informed that, hey, congratulations, your film has been optioned, and that means that they are reserving the right to make that movie, and you might get a check for $100,
Yeah.
maybe more if you're like a known person, but if you're just getting going and nobody else has offered you anything, sometimes it's really that low. And then the big problem for you as a writer at that point is, just because they've optioned the film doesn't mean they have to make it. And unfortunately for you, you can't take it anywhere else at that point. They have reserved the right. They basically
Right.
put their thumb on it, and you are completely at their mercy from that point forward. It would be one thing if they optioned it and never made it, and it was like, hey, that's fine. I'll just go see if anyone else wants to make it. But you can't, typically for 5 years or more.
Yeah.
And so when I say decision making, it's just they're not thinking at all about like, man, this person's great to work with. I mean, might be thinking about that a little bit. They're purely just thinking about the metrics and the you know market research they've done, and whether that film is going to hit at the moment, or whether they think they can make a similar thing with somebody else who's more notable, or whatever. And you're very low on the threshold of priority, at that point. Whereas if you were doing something in the Web3 sort of world, the budgets aren't going to be as big, at least in the current state of things. But you could end up, in with a group like Decentralized Pictures, which was coincidentally, founded by people who do have an extensive background in entertainment, the Coppola family and several others. And they do all kinds of really interesting ways to, like script competitions, and the community gets to vote on which scripts they like, and it's generally doing short films and stuff like that. But they make real films as a result of that, and I think one day they could be making full-length feature films. And they have great mentorship from people who are, very experienced in the industry, and all kinds of things like that. And it's a really interesting, community organized sort of experience that uses Web3 ethos and technology to make it all happen. So the decision making is all about just not having 10 people, 15 people at the top of the major studios getting to decide what movies get made and which ones don't. Instead, it can be much broader and community oriented and that kind of thing.
Oriented. Right. Right. Well, I love how you simplified that and broke it down. I guess that with the ownership that you mentioned before is actually I consider it like a very great incentive, like for artists and creators alike. Wow, very interesting. Um, okay, can you tell us like a bit about like what you do at Macroverse? I hope I got that right. What you do at Macroverse, and what it's about. Just curious
Sure.
to learn more about that.
Yeah, so we are a digital comic book business. Really, we think of ourselves as just a digital entertainment business because we have lots of plans to go way beyond comics. We see comics as really a great like incubator for IPs because they're fast to make compared to animation or games or anything else. They're much cheaper to make compared to other media, and they're also just a ton of fun. So that's really where we start. We originally began as a Web2 company about 4 years ago, just focused on the goal of trying to create a better user experience for digital comics because generally speaking in the realm of digital comics, there's not much of anything out there that's very good, quite frankly. Even the big companies like Marvel and DC and stuff like that, when the digital age was really kind of happening and pretty much every industry was looking at how to go digital, these big companies more or less just released PDF readers. And that provides like a mediocre experience on a tablet, and it's basically unusable on a phone because you have a full screen, or a full size comic page reduced to the size of a phone screen. I don't have to tell you why that doesn't work very well. So Macroverse devised just a way better user interface for being able to, consume this type of entertainment content. And then about a year into the business existing, that's when NFTs really started kind of blowing up in the spring of 2021. And there was a bit of an aha moment for the founding team here that was, very proud of the app we have, but the one downside to it is people like collecting comics, and you can't collect ours because they're just in an app. So we thought, man, the uh, the NFT space could be a really interesting way to introduce collectability to this. And then we were really observing what was happening in the space, and there were a number of projects that were doing comic books. And the way they did it was the NFT was a picture of cover art, and the comic itself was a token gated PDF. So we're back in PDF land, but now it's token gated. So we've actually made it worse. And we thought, man, it could be so much better than that in this space as well. So we devised a new technology that really puts all of the content into the NFT itself. So instead of collecting a cover art image, which grants you access to a PDF, you're collecting the whole story itself as the NFT in this really cool interactive sort of way that most importantly allows you to read the whole story and the entire season worth of content, in fact, all in an NFT wherever you can view it. You don't even have to come to our website. Anywhere you might be, um, on a secondary marketplace or just in your own mobile wallet or wherever you can view the NFT, you can read the whole story. But if you were browsing a secondary marketplace and looking at them and you don't own it, then you can actually still consume some of the content, but it stops you after a few pages worth of content. So we thought it was important for people to be able to get a glimpse of it, but also wanted to get around the issue of, hey, if I can read this whole thing because it's just viewable wherever, why would I buy one if I'm just
Right.
doing it not to collect it, but just because I want to read it? Then why would I do that? So we had to engineer that from scratch. It's taken us about 2 years. We're just getting ready to release it, in fact. Um, so it's really, it comes down to that, just the collectability of great digital comics. We have a couple dozen titles on the app, and we have over 100 in production, working with all kinds of artists and creators, and a lot of it is our original stuff. We're beginning to adapt comics from major publishers and modifying their pages to actually fit on our app and things like that. So I think we will become a great resource for publishers of all kinds to both provide a better digital reading experience in the Web2 world, as well as any of them who want to get into Web3 collectibles, to take it to that next step beyond uh, cover art JPEGs and token gated PDFs to do something truly unique. We're hoping to be essentially like a technology partner to large, medium-sized publishers, etc. And then from there, as I mentioned, we're really incubating all this IP as comics, but our founders' backgrounds are in film, television, gaming, and so on. And so the plan is to expand our most popular titles into all sorts of other different types of media.
That's very cool. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for thanks for sharing that with us. Are there okay? I know there are some persons listening to us from YouTube and on Discord. If anyone has any question, we have Bennett with us who has been talking to us about the potential of Web3 to create new forms of entertainment. And even though we have only been on the space for barely 30 minutes, I think he has dished out um so much value. I've actually been able to pick up so much from all that he has said so far, especially with the how when he talked about decentralized entertainment and how he broke down like the ownership and the decision making aspect of it, which I believe is a great incentive for creators. So if you have any questions, you can write them on the chat, and you'll be sure that we would get that over to Bennett to, answer that. And if you want to check him out, his name is Bennett Phillips on LinkedIn, or you can connect with him if you think there are any touch points. I'm just curious to know if there are other Web3 based entertainment projects that you are excited about that maybe you want to talk about as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, gosh, there's quite a few. Where to begin? So I mentioned decentralized pictures. I really like those guys. I've also been watching closely in the film world. Filmio, they call themselves, but it's film.io. And also in the sort of film 3 world, there's Entertainment, MINT, like minting an NFT. Um, there's a group they call themselves the Squad, and this is a film 3 thing as well. In comics, there's again quite a few. They all have different approaches and each unique in their own way, but I'm a fan of Lightning Works, like D Reader, which is on Solana. I like 24/7 Comics. I like Myth Division is another one in the comic space. He's doing some animation things as well now. Um, and there's a number of kind of independent creators in that world. I'd say those are like the main platform ones. There's another organization called, and I'll just kind of rattle off some that come to mind. And if any friends are listening and I forget you, I apologize, but sometimes it's hard to remember everybody. But I'm a big fan of a group called Feature.io, doing a number of interesting things, primarily well, really in lots of different aspects. They have some gaming things coming up. They've done an NFT comic themselves as well that did quite well. They have a project coming up. I think it's with Formula One or some kind of racing thing. I'm forgetting off the top of my head if it's Formula One or not. And they also have some pretty cool technology where people are rewarded for watching things. So you might watch like a movie trailer, and then just by watching it, there's a collectible, an NFT minted to your wallet at the end of it. And I could see all kinds of cool things being done with that. Where, I can't speak for them, but it's just as I picture it, it's like maybe you watch a trailer, and because you were one of the first X number of people to watch it, you receive a special NFT that maybe gives you a discount on the movie ticket when it comes out, or all kinds of things. That's one of the most exciting things to me, is the interoperability of it all, where just because you did one thing here, it actually benefits you over there. And by the way, that's something we intend to do, where you might be able to sort of find an item within the pages of a digital comic, and by finding it there, it ends up in your inventory in the game that's related to that story, and having all that happen instantly. Um, Gosh, what else? I'm a fan of Gala, so Gala Games, Gala Film, Gala Music. They're doing some pretty awesome stuff in that arena. Um, Gosh, who else? Super Plastic is interesting. I think they've done quite a bit in the digital or physical collectible space, and they've also gotten into NFTs over the last couple of years, and they have a deal in place with Amazon where they're making animation and shows and things for them that have to do with their characters and other original concepts. And Gosh, those are the first ones that come to mind for me, but I'm sure there's just a ton more.
That's a handful of lists.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Mike, do you have any question that you would want to ask? Bennett, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So far, really interesting. But my questions relate to the bringing people into the platforms. If you look at Web 2, music, and other platforms, very few people make most of the money in terms of royalties, revenue, etc.
Hmm.
So the platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, etc., the people who get checks, significant checks from those platforms, is quite small. And
Yeah.
I imagine in the movie industry, people who try to make movies is even less of a share of the percentage. So how do you see this being any different than those kind of efforts, even though they're pretty open to a broad range of people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And by the way, I don't know that we need Web3 to solve that necessarily. I think it has to do with more with greed and control than with technology. Because you're already seeing things like Fortnite, and their new, forget what it's called off the top of my head, but their new kind of user generated like map experience where you can go in there and create your own game map and be able to participate significantly. I think the top 10 of those are making like $1 million a month for their portion, and they get like 40% or something. So it's not pennies. Now, granted, that's just the top 10, but the point is the percentage that's being shared is way more significant, and I think we'll see more things like that. And then in like the streaming world, you see things like Kick, where they completely turn the model on its head. Instead of Twitch, who takes most of the money and you get a little piece of it, Kick did exactly the opposite. I think they take 10% or something, and the streamers are on their platform take most of it. And you could argue, well, then the company itself is going to have way fewer resources, so they'll have a harder time innovating, and et cetera. I just think there's so many tools now that accelerate innovation that it takes way less to do way more these days. And if you can drive a lot more adoption by being more generous, then I think there's a definite path to winning in that direction. I mean, we do a similar thing with Macroverse, even just on our Web2 app. uh, are the way that we work with independent comic creators or even just publishers, basically anybody who's putting their comics on our app that's not an original title from us. So if it came from anybody outside, whether they're Marvel or an independent person, what we do is we take half of our subscription revenue and we set it aside, and then we split that up evenly based on page view counts. So if you happen to be, for some reason your story blows up one month and you've got like 80% of the traffic on our whole app is going to you, then you get 80% of that 50% of our entire month's revenue. Um, and so again, it's not going to be like some kind of guaranteed money for everybody on the platform, but we feel that percentage wise, it's way more generous than anything else out there. The only comparison we can really make in digital comics is with Webtoon, which is primarily an Asian user base. So they're not as big in the West, but they have like 100 million monthly active users. And they're more like the YouTube of digital comics. So there's lots and lots of stuff on there. Only a little bit of it is really excellent. Again, just like YouTube, and only a very small number of people are making any real money on.
That's
We aim to be a little bit more like the Netflix in terms of curating and quality, and it is a paid app versus a free ad supported thing, and then just splitting up the revenue literally in half between creators and us as the business. So my point is we don't need Web3 for that, but I do think that Web3 accelerates in some interesting ways and allows for people to collaborate and participate with one another. I mean, you could have an example where maybe some people want to purchase the rights to something in the same way they would in the real world, but they want to do it with some people they've met who live all around the world, and they don't even necessarily ever need to meet each other in order to use maybe something like a multi-signature wallet or what have you to make a transaction happen that is then controlled in a, I don't want to say trustless way. I think you need some trust with people like that, but it's also a controlled sort of way that's that's data driven and data proven instead of just a, kind of some sort of handshake thing. And I think there's ways to collaborate too. I mean, so you could picture where several people, again, I love the global aspect of it also. You could have a number of different people who do like the same stuff people do on TikTok right now, where they stitch together and you have, I don't know if you've seen this, where somebody will just start with like a drum beat or whatever, and then somebody stitches themselves with that and they're playing a guitar, and then somebody else stitches themselves with that and they're singing, and someone else comes in with a trumpet and who knows what. And it actually goes down lots of different directions because multiple people are coming in at any various point throughout that journey of adding more instruments and adding their rendition to it. Picture like a Web3 platform that's doing that, but with attribution. So when the version of that goes viral is sort of identified, and maybe it turns into a real song that gets picked up by a label or whatever it might be, or maybe it's just earning money directly because it's a Web3 platform. We know who the contributors to that were without really even needing to know their name or their bank account number or anything like that. It just sort of happens. And that's just in music. I mean, I could see that happening in tons of different ways. Oh, that reminds me, the another company I didn't mention before, who's basically building like a a base layer of technology to allow this kind of thing to happen across all different types of media, and I'm just drawing a blank on what they're called. I'll try to think of it as we keep talking.
I'm glad you mentioned Fortnite, because Fortnite, I think they've already passed out $200 million of money to the people who have created these kind of games on the Fortnite platform already.
Mhm.
It's only been 6 or 8 months since they started this program. And I think Bandcamp has the same kind of model in the music field, where people share in the revenue from their songs, and Bandcamp only takes a small percentage. But another question that came up when you were talking about movies. Movies are expensive to make, and that's part of the reason why I think they consolidate the decision making in the hands of a few people who have the control of that money in each of the companies that makes those big decisions.
Mhm.
How do you get around that problem with a kind of decentralized decision making model, or decentralized model on the movie side?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. We talked a little bit about this before. I don't know that there's a way to get around it completely. Um, but I think it's going to take some like bold leadership from somebody, because I don't know that there's a world where, let's say it is in filmmaking or whatever, where we can kind of make all the decisions on which movies should get made and what kind of budget they should get and stuff like that. I'm not sure that like a group of fans who are using a voting system to decide those things can quite work. But I think that it can work in the sense that if you have somebody with experience, with some know-how, who's kind of steering the ship overall, but then inviting that kind of participation from people and rewarding them for participating, um, then I think there's an ability to at least spread out some of the, um, again, I don't know if I'd call it like full on decision making, but at least making informed decisions based on an audience of people who are an important stakeholder, meaning like the audience. Um, and so like I don't want to suggest that it's going to go from the current model to some sort of altruistic model, or like benevolent model of there's no more people at the top making all the money. But I think it can at least shift somewhat in the other direction, where it's not all or nothing, and it's more less maybe at the top and the rest being spread around in interesting ways for those who want to get involved.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, I think it's a great idea, and it's coming. It's definitely coming in a lot of different fields, and it's happening pretty fast.
Right.
One other question about the movie analogy, or even the music analogy. Lots of music that hits the top, and almost all the movies, I would say, that have big marketing budgets behind them. That seems to be a big problem for the many of the creators. Have great
Mhm.
music or great pieces of art, getting in front of people without having some obnoxious piece that goes viral accidentally. How do you overcome? Have you thought about this? The whole area of money for marketing. How do people attract an audience?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of different ways of thinking about it. One is this has not been perfected yet, but I think people like believe that it could happen, which is having lots of regular people pushing the narrative on something being cool and like worth seeing and worth trying out because they are in some way involved. Maybe they have an NFT or something from the project in question, and so they are sort of inherently incentivized to spread the word about it. They could be actually getting directly rewarded um, through some kind of token or whatever for that. I think that's very imperfect still because then you end up having a lot of quantity but low quality on that type of work. People who just trying to like grind to make some easy cash and not putting a whole lot of effort into it, you know, so it's just like a bunch of nonsense. um, but I think there are ways to that we will devise over time where people are rewarded for, you know, quality engagement rather than just quantity of engagement. I think AI is probably part of that, being able to determine what's actually making a difference. Um, isn't just like engagement for engagement's sake. And then I think the other way is the traditional film industry relies so much on marketing. I mean, you might have a $50 million film that you also spend $50 million in marketing on that film. So now your budget's actually 100 million, and it might end up doing like 75 million in the box office. And to the layperson, it's like, well, there wasn't a blockbuster hit, but they made some money. And it's like, no, they actually didn't. um, and the way to get around that, I think, is an iterative process of building out that world. I have bias around this, but my belief is that it should start as a comic, because then what you can do is comic books are by far the most inexpensive visual medium for storytelling. Like a regular novel is even cheaper to make, but if you want it to be visual, that's our whole thesis basically, is that we can test lots and lots of stories as comics for a relatively low amount of money and then double down on the ones that do well. And so you can develop and market a comic or graphic novel series for a small fraction of the cost of even one episode of television and break even at least. I don't want to say easily, but way more easily than a big budget film. And then from there, you can double down into something more substantial, still in written and static format, or even further into maybe some animated shorts or whatever. And my point is, instead of it being all or nothing with this big film release, you build it little by little. And the only way that that's going to really work is it's going to have to be done by organizations who are not so accustomed to basically making X number of films per year, expecting a couple of them to be major hits, expecting some other number of them to at least break even, and then just being okay with the fact that a lot of them will lose money and you still end up profitable because you got your couple of blockbuster hits. It's like almost similar to VC kind of thing. Um, I don't think those are the types of companies who are going to be comfortable doing what I just described because they're just too stuck in their other ways. But I think companies like us and others who may find even more innovative ways to do this that doesn't involve comics, I think that's fine. But my point is you build it up slowly and just keep doubling down on what works and just scrapping what doesn't. It's like rapid prototyping for entertainment. So I think if you go that path, you don't end up needing some huge outlay of cash for marketing because the burden of break even cost is way lower.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're sorry to horn in read it, but I have one more question. We're coming
No,
up
you're
on
good.
the hour. The question is, how did you get here? You clearly, you
You
know,
know, sometimes I don't even know.
well, it sounds like you know a ton about a bunch of industries that are quite interesting, music and comics, and you know all the competitors. And so, how did you get here? Are you a comic book fan, or are you a business guy that now is interested in comic books?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's a little of both, I guess. I got to Macroverse just through the Web3 space, honestly. I started working full time in the space a little over 2 years ago at a different company at first, and was just doing a ton of networking and meeting people and stuff like that. I've definitely always been just a fan of entertainment. I mean, who isn't? But But I do like comics. I mean, I definitely liked them when I was a kid, and I had kind of forgotten about them. And then my brother got me back into them, and I would say more graphic novels than comics, which, I won't bore you with the nuanced difference between the two. But my brother got me back into them when I was like 30 or something, and I ever since I've just thought, man, this is such an overlooked and great way of doing things. And I think because my experience prior to digital entertainment, but even prior to blockchain as well, has always been in business. It's been in finance, business strategy, leadership, different things like that. I was able to come in and see this, and I don't want to like suggest I'm the first person to have noticed this, but to see comics as a really great incubation hub and to do all the things I just described around rapid prototyping and whatnot, because it just made sense from a business model perspective. Um, and so, yeah, I met the founders of Macroverse just through the space. We became friends, and I started kind of making introductions for them to people also in the space who I thought they'd benefit from meeting each other. And when the opportunity showed up that they were at a stage that they were ready to take on an actual head of BD, business development, it was just the right place, the right time. And so I jumped in. No background in entertainment, which is their entire background, across all kinds of different entertainment, movies, TV, games, all of it. And so I've learned a ton from them about the industry, and then just have been able to apply my own skills around business development that I really have grown to believe that it's the same skill set no matter what industry you're in. When it comes to BD, you just need to have great subject matter experts who back you up. So when we do get on a call with like a film studio or a publisher or something, I have them there to actually speak the language that I don't still fully speak, but have learned a ton about in just a short period of time.
Great. Thanks for that answer.
Yeah.
Wow. Uh, Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you, Bennett, for that has been a very interesting conversation. And I've enjoyed listening to everything that you have said. And yeah, we're almost at the end of our space. To round up the space, I have just one more question. I know when you were speaking, you talked about getting involved. So talking about that, what advice would you give to aspiring creators and entrepreneurs who are looking to leverage Web3 to develop like new entertainment experiences? What would your final words be for the space?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're already a creator, I mean, if you're like a somebody who wants to become a creator, whether it be again comics or filmmaking or whatever, and you don't have experience doing that, then my first recommendation would be just do it. Just start doing it. Like just try stuff, make mistakes, whatever, and begin networking right away too. I wouldn't suggest anybody like wait till you're really good at it to begin to build that network, because you can do both at the same time, and nobody's going to be like, you're not good enough yet, I won't talk to you. Especially in this space, I feel like people are really open because it's still so small and intimate. They may not want to like bring you on to their project if you don't have a lot of experience or skill yet, but they'll be happy to still like know you. And then if you do have some experience in the space, in just making whatever type of art or entertainment content or music, whatever it is, then I think just jump straight to that second part. Really, it's all about networking, as is every industry. But it's just, again, I feel like there's a bit of openness in this space, because I think we all, a little bit, as anybody who's in Web3 has that little voice in the back of their head going, am I crazy? Like, is this awesome, or are we insane? And so every time, I know for me and a lot of people I know, whenever someone reaches out, who you don't know, and they want to talk with you about it, you're like, maybe I'm not crazy. This person wants to talk about it too. So I've never before experienced the openness of being able to meet with people that I never thought I'd have meetings with, just because we're talking about this. And I think it's a great time. It's a great time to be doing that kind of stuff, because of that openness. So that's what I'd say is like reach out, and if you haven't gotten started, then get started too.
Oh, that's quite the advice. Thank you very much, Bennett, again for joining us. Bennett has said so much, and I'm sure by now from the conversation that we've had, you understand now that Web3 has the potential to revolutionize the entertainment industry, to empower creators, give ownership, foster, community-driven project decision making, and introduce like new experiences that really transcend the limitation of the traditional media. Yeah, and as we as the space is evolving and as we venture further into this emerging landscape, we can anticipate a future, where entertainment is more participatory, creator centric, and of course boundary pushing, than ever before. And it has been quite the space. I'm sure I'm going to release into, the space to, just to make sure that I'm not missing any information. Thank you once again, Bennett. And yeah, so we've come to the end of our space. This has been an amazing space. And yeah, thanks.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Good talking with you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Rita.